We live in a very outcome-focused society. Even if you are talented, you can't succeed without having great habits. We think the thing that needs to change is the bank account or the test score or the number on the scale, but actually the thing that needs to change are the habits that precede those outcomes. They are the portion of your life that you can influence. You can be the architect of your habits rather than the victim of them. The things that are on your desk at home, your office at work, they influence your behaviors. If you can restructure your physical environment, then you're more likely to actually stick with the right habit. But the question to ask is, what are those one or two things that tend to pull the rest of my life in line? You can just build that one habit and you know that there's going to be a lot of good side effects because of it. Every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you want to become. Once you've changed that internal story, you're just like, this is who I am now.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... Did you realize that the results in your life are a measure of your habits? What do you do every single day to be successful? That determines who you are. And if I look at your habits right now, I can tell the person that you want to become. And it's a hard thing to really think about, but what are you doing every single day for your health, your lifestyle, your diet, your business? Those little 1% changes can have a massive effect over time. And that's what our guest is here to talk about today, Mr. James Clear, Atomic Habits. And he really structures it all out to get you what you want. And he also says that we don't rise to our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. What systems do we have in place to get our lives to the next level? And I love this book, Atomic Habits. There's all sorts of vital information in there about how you can put routines in place that make you feel good, that make them repeatable, and they can really change the course of your life. So I know you're gonna enjoy my time with James. He's got a whole structured layout of how you can change your life starting today. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is James Clear, the writer, entrepreneur, speaker, and New York Times bestselling author. You've spent years educating millions of readers on the importance of habits, decision-making, and continuous improvement. You're a regular speaker at Fortune 500 companies, and your work is used in the NFL, NBA, and MLB. Your new book, Atomic Habits, details your system of building good habits and breaking bad ones, showing how small changes can have a transformative effect in every aspect of your life. James, welcome to London Real.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
It's great to have you here. First, we'd love to get your impressions on this city we call London. What do you think about this place?
I love London. I could definitely live here. I see all kinds of opportunities, like there are fascinating people. It doesn't really matter what industry you're interested in, finance, fashion, publishing, whatever it is, you can find somebody cool to hang out with. Great food, which I am all about. I basically have ate my way around the city for the last few days. So I love visiting.
And you said you'd recently been to New York and Los Angeles and Tokyo, but you wouldn't necessarily live in those cities.
I love all those cities and I love visiting them, but I feel like I could carve out a life in London and call it home, and I don't know what it is. There's something a little less stressful about walking around in London to me. All the neighborhoods are different. You can find one that's the right fit for you. I don't know, it just feels more cozy to me.
Yeah, it really is this grouping of neighborhoods, maybe like 30 or 40 neighborhoods. And you could say Manhattan it's like Chelsea and the West Village and Upper East Side, but to a normal civilian, when they go there, it kind of looks the same. But here you kind of have vibes and restaurants and attitudes. And yeah, I find it.
London's fairly spread out. It's a fairly large city, whereas New York naturally is contained, right? Manhattan in particular, and it has to be on the island. LA is pretty spread out, and Tokyo is massive. But yeah, I don't know. For someone who was born in America, I feel like London would be a interesting fit for me. I feel like I could call it home, and it would still be fascinating in all kinds of other ways.
Yeah, good to hear. I think you could. I came here 17 years ago and just haven't left since. But it's weirdly, some people describe it as like LA, New York, and DC rolled up in one, because in one city you've got government, finance, media, advertising in one place. So it doesn't have a vibe that just kind of overarches the other too much. So it's kind of weird in that sense and kind of cool.
It's also, I mean, for me as an American, pretty much everywhere in Europe is interesting to travel to, and you couldn't have much of a better jumping off point than London. You can get nonstop to anywhere. So that part would make it exciting too. Like you could see the rest of this interesting part of the world very easily.
Yeah, you can be in some very different places in about 2 hours.
Yeah, right.
Like really different places, different realities. So cool. Well, welcome to that. I'm really excited to talk about these habits with you, because I've had over 500 people sitting in that chair. And after the first 200 or 300, I started asking myself, what makes this person get in this chair as opposed to the person I just walked by on the sidewalk, or the person that drove my bus, or the person that served me coffee? And I'm always like, what makes them different? And I came to this conclusion that there are no high-performance people, just high-performance habits. But when I tell people that, and when I tell my students in our academy that, a lot of times it just goes over their head. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. But I think somehow, deep down inside, we always equate it with like a talent. That person's a billionaire, or they were always going to be that way. That person's a great actor, a great athlete. But from what I've seen, it usually comes down to great habits. And if you really dissect their behavior, it turns out that they're doing some really pretty granular things that they're doing. I haven't met too many people that wake up at 5 a.m. that actually do great things. A lot of times those people are actually doing things. I don't know many people that wake up at 5 a.m. and then watch Netflix. I mean, there's usually, I know Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL, and like he's getting up at 4 a.m. and posting pictures of his watch. But a lot of times those people are being effective. And so I really do think habits are important. So I hope everybody listening really plugs into what we're going to say, because it's not just about being high performance or getting what you want. I think it's about having a great life. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I think there actually are. I agree with that point, but it's, I think, even deeper than that. So it's not that luck and randomness and uncertainty don't play a role in life. They do. Luck is a part of all of our lives to a certain degree, both good fortune and bad. But by definition, you don't have control over luck. And your habits also matter. And I think that the reason they're so worthwhile to focus on and understand is that they are the portion of your life that you can influence that also determines your outcomes. It's not just luck, it's not just habits, but one of those you have control over. And so it makes sense. The only reasonable strategy is to focus on what you can control. If you spend all of your time focusing on things you can't control, then you're just going to end up frustrated. And so I think habits are maybe the best lever for that. Now, something that I say deeper in the book that I also think is true is that talent and genes, they play a role. Like I have a chapter, I think it's chapter 18 or 19, it's like the role of genes and habits and how they interplay. And it's important, people have natural predispositions to things that make them better. But what you find is that nearly always when someone is a great performer in a particular domain, they are both well-suited, so naturally talented or have some kind of predisposition to that area, and well-trained. And so even if you are talented, you can't succeed without having great habits to execute and to fully realize the potential that you have. Right. And so no matter where we're talking, I think habits play a crucial role.
Yeah, we've all heard the story of the coach that just is shaking his head because that one kid had so much talent, but he never showed up to practice.
I think sometimes, I played baseball all the way through college, and I think sometimes I would rather be an athlete that's at like the 90th percentile of physical talent, but like the 95th of execution and habits than the other way around. Because if you don't have the habits and the practice routines and rituals to actually realize your potential, a lot of the time it's just not enough. It's enough at lower levels, but once you get to the top of any field, everybody's talented. And so the thing that separates you is often not the physical gifts, but your ability to practice, get out of your own way, your mental approach, all that type of stuff. Anyway, so those are some more nuanced points, but I think the central thing that you were getting at is true. Your outcomes in life are often a lagging measure of your habits. Like a lot of the time people talk about, I want to have more money, or I want to lose weight, or I want some kind of result. But the truth is, Your bank account is a lagging measure of your financial habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning and reading habits. And so it's actually, we think the thing that needs to change is the bank account or the test score or the number on the scale, but actually the thing that needs to change are the habits that precede those outcomes.
Right. And even more so, your identity and sense of self a lot of times is all rolled up into your habits, which is even a crazier kind of a messing with your brain. In that these little things you do that you might ignore all the time could change who you actually are.
So I had this question while I was researching the book. I think identity plays a crucial role, but my question was like, well, how do we come to believe things about ourselves? Because when you come into the world as a baby, you don't have any preset beliefs or notions. That's not to say that, again, your genes don't matter. They certainly matter in some sense, like your height might be more or less baked into your DNA. But we all realize that if you grew up in a different culture or a different religion or a different community or household, you could adopt completely different beliefs if that was what you were raised in. And so I was like, well, how does that happen, right? How does this internal story that we tell ourselves, our identity, become shaped and formed? And I realized that it's mostly through the repetition of that story. And so what you come to realize is that your habits reinforce a particular identity. And sometimes this can be positive and sometimes it can be negative. The story could be things like, I'm bad at math, or I'm terrible at remembering people's names, or I'm not good at remembering directions places.
Yeah.
And all of those that's just an internal story that you tell yourself. But each time you have an experience that reinforces that, the story gets solidified. And so I think the method, the takeaway here is that every action you take is kind of like a vote for the type of person you want to become. And if you can master the right actions, if you can master the right habits, then you can start to cast votes for this new identity, this desired person that you want to be. And I think that's one of the reasons why small habits matter so much. They don't necessarily transform your life overnight, right away. Like doing one push-up does not transform your body. But it does cast a vote for being the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. Or meditating for 1 minute might not give you an immediate sense of calm in your life. But it does cast a vote for being a meditator. And this is why one of the things I say in the book, like the real goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to write a book. The goal is to become a writer. Because once you've adopted that identity, you're really not even pursuing behavior change anymore. You're just kind of acting in alignment with the type of person you already see yourself to be. It's kind of like true behavior change is really identity change. Because once you've changed that internal story, it's way easier to show up each day. You're not even really motivating yourself that much to do it. You're just like, this is who I am now.
Yeah, and we'll get into that because the difference between goals and systems, I think, kind of touches on this a little bit, which is important. You know, a couple of years ago, we were teaching in our academy. We were teaching people how to start their own podcasts and how to start businesses from their profile. And someone said to me, Brian, can you teach me stuff that's non-business related? And so I looked at my life. And over the past 4 or 5 years, I had picked up all of these habits from the guests that had sat in that chair, from habits on how to meditate and do affirmations and do like a low media diet and movement practices and eating habits. And I actually hadn't even thought about it, but by being around them and watching them, I started practicing them and I picked up all these like amazing habits. And I also had some bad habits, like about 10 or 15 years ago. I had drug addictions. I had all this other stuff that I kind of talked about last year in one of my movies. So it'd be good to kind of explore, you know, how these things get put in place, how you can maybe choose the good ones or the bad ones, and then identify a lot of the psychology behind this stuff. So I'd love to jump in. And there's so much IP in this book. It's an amazing book. I'd love to talk about some of the fundamentals, some of the definitions, what's a habit, and then I'd love to get into some of your sections about how to make a habit obvious, how to make it attractive, how to make it easy, how to make it satisfying.
Sure.
And then maybe we'll have some chance to go into some of the advanced stuff, like you said, with DNA and things like that. So start it all off. Well, first of all, what is a habit and why did you get obsessed with this?
Yeah. Okay, so 2 different questions. So let's just do the definition first. So the technical definition of a habit is a behavior that has been repeated enough times to be more or less automatic. So things that you can do pretty much without thinking about them. Unplugging your toaster after each use, or tying your shoes, or brushing your teeth. Things that you pretty much just go on autopilot when you do them. Now, we often use the word habit to mean different things than that, and we can get into this more. Like you might say things like, I want to get in the habit of working out, or I want to get in the habit of writing every day. And I know what you mean when you say that, right? You mean I want to make it a regular practice. I want to make it this daily ritual that I follow. But you're never going to go like on autopilot and forget what you write for an hour, right? Like it's a more effortful, conscious thing. And so we can talk about some of that distinction, particularly with making habits easy. What you really want to do is make the beginning easy and automatic, and then the rest of the routine can follow naturally, even if you're consciously thinking about it. But anyway, so that's what a habit is. It's this automatic response. Now, why does the brain build them? What role does it play? Well, as you go through life, you need energy to survive. And this is true not just for humans, but for all organisms need some kind of energy to survive. And getting energy requires energy. You need to eat food to be able to walk around and find the next meal. And using energy is expensive because the more energy you use, the less you have available for the other things that life throws at you. And so your brain is looking for ways to conserve energy whenever possible. And habits are a great method for doing that. So for example, when our ancestors were roaming around the savannah, if there was a berry patch 100 meters from you, it made sense to go to that berry patch rather than one that was like on the other side of the mountain, right? You would choose the path of least resistance. And eventually, what your brain learns is, oh, whenever I'm by this tree, that means the berry patch is 100 meters away. And so the tree becomes a signal that, hey, food is over there. And your brain is always picking up on these signals throughout life that indicate where things are at. And the more that you come across those signals, the more you automate your response. And pretty soon you're taking a right when you get to that tree, even though you're not even thinking about it. You're just doing it automatically. And it makes that whole process of finding energy, solving the problems of life, and getting through things easier. It requires less energy and attention and effort than it did before.
So it's like an algorithm the brain built for itself to survive.
Yes, I think that's a good way to describe it. It is. It's like an algorithm that you can rely on. It's a cognitive script, a mental shortcut that you can pull out whenever the situation is right. And that's true not just for things like finding food, which is essential for our survival, but also for daily tasks, because all these daily tasks take energy as well. So something like tying your shoes, your brain learns the context of when I have a shoe on my foot and the shoestring is untied, that means I do this little routine where I tie the shoelace into a knot and so on. And the first time you do it, it takes energy, but after you do it 100 times or 1,000 times or 10,000 times, pretty soon you're doing it just like turning right at the tree. You can have a conversation with somebody else or listen to a podcast or think about your to-do list for the day. You free up that energy and attention to be used elsewhere. And this is perhaps the biggest thing that they do, you have less wasted energy. Rather than fumbling with the laces and trying hard to do it, you can do it more quickly and fluently, and that saves you energy and time for the next task. So that's why your brain builds them, and what a habit does. And then as far as why I got interested in them, I started to realize, similar to what I hinted at a moment or two ago, that both luck and habits play a role in life, but that you have control over your habits. And the funny thing is, we're building them all the time, but a lot of people don't feel like they have control over their habits. They feel like their habits are taking control of them, that they're like a victim of these bad routines. And once you start to dive in a little bit and like uncover the layers and realize what a habit is and how it works, then you start to develop a little more control over it. And I think if we're going to be building habits anyway, then it makes more sense to be able to understand how they work and how to structure them so that you can be the architect of your habits rather than the victim of them.
Okay. And you break them down into this cue, craving, response, and reward, which is kind of not their traditional way. But maybe it's good to jump into that. And I think most people, when they think habits, they probably think of their bad habits, right? Mm-hmm. Do most people not reward themselves for their good habits and are critical of their bad habits, and some of these aren't even habits?
So I choose that 4-stage model: cue, craving, response, reward. There's a lot of science behind it. 3 of those 4 stages are very common: cue, response, and reward. Started in like the early 1900s, but 1930s it got popularized with B.F. Skinner, which his model was stimulus, response, reward. And then Charles Duhigg's book, Power of Habit, has kind of brought it back to the forefront: cue, routine, reward, basically the same thing, just different words. And the idea, and there's 100 years of behavioral psychology research behind this, that if you show someone the right cue, and they take an action, and then you follow it with a reward, you can train them to do that thing whenever the cue arises again, whenever the stimulus happens. So if whenever the light in the lab turns on, the monkey gets a squirt of juice, then it knows whenever the light is on, I should go over and put my mouth underneath the nozzle to get some juice or whatever. And you can do that for all kinds of things. And it works for human behavior as well in many ways. But then there was this second wave of research with cognitive psychology over the last probably 50 to 75 years that shows that not only do external cues and external rewards influence our habits, but also internal moods, emotions, feelings, thoughts, beliefs, those influence our behaviors too. And so that's why I added that fourth stage of craving. And I think actually it's really important because it answers, I just had a couple like basic questions that I thought when I was dealing with this kind of breaking habits down and why should they be organized in a particular way? How do we understand them? And one of the questions is, well, if it's cue, response, reward, how come people have different responses to the same cue? There has to be something going on there. So you have two people that walk into a room and there's a pack of cigarettes on the counter. And one person sees it and they feel this craving to smoke and pull a cigarette out. And the other person has never smoked a day in their life and they see that same visual cue, but they think, oh, it's just a pack of cigarettes, and they move on. And what happens, and the key for that craving stage, is that it's really about the prediction or the meaning that you assign to the cue that determines whether you get a craving or not. So it comes back to that internal moods, states, emotions, feelings. And so...
Interesting you bring that up because there's a book called Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking.
Yep.
He's now dead. But I read this 20 years ago or something and it actually worked. And it was weird how what you're saying now is the pack of cigarettes used to cue, okay, I gotta smoke. And then after reading a book like that, it cued, I'm not gonna poison myself anymore and I understand the trick it's playing on me. So, I mean, this is kind of...
You're like probably the fourth or fifth person that's told me about that book now.
Really?
Yeah, and so I think this is actually quite hard to do for breaking bad habits, which is rewiring the story in your brain for what a cue means.
Yeah.
But in the long run, that is actually, I think, a very robust way to break a bad habit, is to learn to teach yourself that that cue means something new. Say you walk downstairs and you see a loaf of bread on the counter each morning and you're like, oh, I should make some toast for breakfast. So now that cue of the loaf of bread means make toast. But then you read a diet and nutrition book that convinces you that like grain and carbs are the devil, right? Well, now you go downstairs and you see that same loaf of bread and it means something totally new. Similar to you, like, oh, now the cigarette means I'm poisoning myself. Now it means, oh, I shouldn't eat that. That's bad for me. And it's really the story that you're telling, the thing that's happening in that second stage of the craving and the prediction about what it is, that changes your response. So to summarize, the reason I chose those four stages is that I was trying to create a model that I felt like accurately described both all of the robust research that is true about behavioral psychology and the research from cognitive psych and the influence of internal states. So my hope is that those four stages accurately describe a habit and how both the internal world and the external world influence our behaviors.
Okay. Talk about goals and systems. Maybe this is the time to get into that because, setting goals, it's kind of a popular thing to talk about in the last few years. I'm actually a fan of them as well, but also I'm an engineer by training, so systems come naturally to me. So for me, it's always like, okay, yeah, and then I'm already thinking about the systems, but I think a lot of people aren't. So can you define that?
Well, so first of all, before I criticize goals a little bit, I should just say, one, this is coming from someone who was very goal-oriented for a long time, right? I set goals for everything, right? Like the grades I wanted to get in school, the weights I wanted to lift in the gym, the revenue numbers I wanted to hit in my business. It was all goal-oriented. And then I turned around a couple years later and I realized I've only achieved some of these, maybe 10, 20%. So clearly setting the goal was not the thing that determined whether I move forward or not, because the majority of the time I'm not achieving them. And so then I had this question like, well, what is it? Now, before I describe the systems approach, I should say goals do serve a purpose, right? It's not that they're useless. They are good for setting a sense of direction and clarity, so figuring out where do I direct my attention, and they're good for filtering. And what I mean by that is it's very easy as you go throughout life for people to come to you with a different opportunity, or you find out about a new area that you're interested in, and you start to say yes to things because, oh, this is new and exciting. But if you have a goal, it's much easier to say no to the things that intrude, right? So if you're training for the Olympics and your friends want to go to the bar, it's very easy to say no because your goal gives you a much cleaner filter to determine, does this move me in the direction I want to go or not? So those are things goals do well. But some of the things that goals do poorly, systems are actually much better for. And so the way that I would describe it is a goal is focused on the outcome, a system is focused on the process. So it's the series of habits or steps that you take to get to that ultimate goal. And so a couple examples. If you are a basketball coach, your goal might be to win the championship, but your system is the way that you recruit assistant coaches and players, the drills that you do at practice each day, the process you have for reviewing game film and prepping for the next game. That's your system. If you are a writer, your goal might be to write a best-selling book, but your system is the writing process that you follow each day and like getting your butt in the chair. It's your research and how you come up with new ideas to write about, the way that you interview potential clients or candidates or people you're thinking about putting in your book, things like that. Okay. Now, the question that I had was, what if you ignored the goal, right? If you say, forget about the goal and focused only on the system. If you were the basketball coach and you said, we're not going to talk about the championship at all this year. We're only going to focus on the way we recruit, the way we practice, the way we train. Would you still get results? And I think for the most part, you probably would. And this, I think, is the hard part, the thing that often gets overlooked, is that we live in a very outcome-focused society. Things are only news stories or shared on social media once they are a result. So the results of success are very visible and easy to view. You know, you're never going to see a story that's like, man eats chicken and salad for lunch today. It's only going to be a story a year later when it's like, man loses 100 pounds. It's only the outcome that is visible.
Because it's like simple for us also to process that thought, right? It's like, oh, I get it. Something important happened. I prioritize it. Because it's this, oh, this event was accomplished, right?
This is one of the things that's challenging about building better habits, is that they're very easy to dismiss on any given day, right? Like, what is the difference between eating a burger and fries for lunch or eating a salad? Not a whole lot on any given day. Your body looks basically the same in the mirror. The scale hasn't really changed. It's really easy to dismiss it in your mind and say, oh, this is kind of insignificant. But you know, you turn around 2 or 5 or 10 years later and you realize, oh wow, those daily choices really did add up. It's just much harder to see on a granular basis. So a shift, all I'm really calling for here is not to say that goals are useless or we should totally ignore them, but instead, rather than making the goal the default, the thing that you focus on almost exclusively, let's make the system the default and then only check in on the goal occasionally to see if we're moving in the right direction.
Okay. And also just kind of realize and admit that we all have a bias towards goals and that we see them everywhere that we go and that we need to maybe kind of de-emphasize them a little bit and just get back to look at the system underneath it maybe.
I think de-emphasize is a good word for that. You know, like goals are in front of us all the time. Outcomes and results are always in front of us. So maybe we just shift the attention a little bit more to the process and the habits.
Yeah, and it's funny, that's what I was talking about. When people come in this chair, I get to spend 2 hours with them. And once you deconstruct your life, you actually see the systems. And that's why when they sit in the chair, they'll see Eddie as the famous comedian or the $50 billion man or the champion boxer. And oh, wow. But when you go into there, you realize that they've gone in and done the work when they didn't want to do it, that they pushed through the difficulty, that all that stuff. And then you see, oh, there's the systems there. Because there rarely is a result without a system.
Well, that's one of the things that is a little bit surprising about goals, is that achieving a goal only changes your life for the moment. It's actually not the thing that you're looking for. We think the results are the thing that needs to change, but it's actually the process behind the results. Like, if you have a messy room, let's say your bedroom is a mess, and you set a goal to clean that room, you can get motivated and do it for 2 or 3 hours, and then you turn around and you have a clean room for now. If you don't change the messy habits that led to a dirty room in the first place, then you turn around 2 weeks later and you have a messy room again. And so actually you don't need a clean room, you need better cleaning habits, and then your room will always be clean. You don't need to lose weight, you need better eating habits, and then your weight will always be around where you want it to be. You don't need more money, you just need better financial habits, and then you'll always have enough money to manage the thing that comes up. And so it's really the habits that need to change, not the result.
And that's why hitting your goal sometime can be really anticlimactic and also can mess with people's lives because they shoot for that goal, they get it, and then they stop achieving, they stop their systems.
There's sort of this like yo-yo effect, you know, like someone trains for a half marathon and then they run the race and that race motivated them to train for the last 3 or 4 months. And then the race ends and they stop, they take a week off, then a week turns into 2 weeks, and then 2 months and so on. And then they turn around like 4 months later and like, man, I haven't ran in months. Like I need to sign up for a new race or something. Because if it's all about the goal, as soon as the goal is achieved, you don't have that motivating you anymore. But if instead it's about being a runner, then even once you finish the race, you still have a reason to show up again the next week because you're like, well, that's what I do is I run. That's who I am.
Right.
And so I think that that's a more, in pretty much any domain, true long-term thinking is really goalless thinking. It's much more about being that person, developing that identity, following that system, and then you just happen to realize your potential along the way.
Okay. Talking about this 1% every day, when people hear that in their minds, they're just like, oh, it's so tiny, it doesn't matter. Well, what is the thought process behind this 1% every day?
Well, so just a quick story that I like that I feel like illustrates the point. So we're in the UK, and for many years, the British cycling team was very mediocre. They had never won a Tour de France, even though the race had been around over 100 years. They had won, I think, a single gold medal back in 1908. And so they brought in this new performance director, 2003, 2004, and he believed in this concept that he called the aggregation of marginal gains. And so he described it as like the 1% improvement in all the areas related to cycling. And so they started by making 1% improvements that other teams were probably looking at too. Put slightly lighter tires on the bike. They had their riders wear these electrically heated overshorts to keep their legs warm so they could ride for longer. They had different biofeedback sensors that each rider would wear, and then they adjusted the programs to each individual. But again, competitive field, a lot of teams are doing that. So then they did a bunch of 1% changes that nobody else was thinking about. Like they hired a surgeon to come in and teach them how to wash their hands to reduce the risk of catching the cold or getting a flu. They split tested different types of massage gels to see which one led to the fastest form of muscle recovery. They even figured out the type of pillow and mattress that led to the best night's sleep for each rider, and then they brought that on the road with them to big events like when they were at hotels for the Tour de France and things like that. And so Brailsford said, all right, the coach said, if we can actually do this, right, execute on all these little 1% changes, then I think we can win a Tour de France within 5 years.
Right. Now, he must have had to really sell people on this because you can already see the naysayers, and we're in Britain as well, where they're going to be like, come on, this is ridiculous.
Right. Well, and it just, no single change seemed like very much, right? Yeah. So one of the changes they made was they had their outdoor riders switch to indoor racing suits because they tested them in a wind tunnel, and turns out the indoor suits were a little more aerodynamic. Which, you think, all right, whatever, I got like basically skin-tight clothes on either way. How's this going to make much of a difference? Right. Anyway, so they did, in fact, execute on all these little changes, and they won the Tour de France not in 5 years, but in 3 years. And then they repeated again the fourth year with a different rider. And then after 1 year off, they've now won the last 3 in a row again. So they've won 5 of the last 6 now, after having never won it for more than 100 years.
It's definitely an obvious anomaly. I mean, you look at it and you're like, what? Because it's not like we have a cycling culture here or anything. It was just a big anomaly when we saw them massively improve. And
so I bring that story up, not because I think, cycling is the perfect example or anything, but just because it's a good story that showcases the power of being committed to making those small improvements each day. And I think that it's not just nice to have. It's not just like a little cherry on top of your performance to make these 1% changes, but they actually can compound and add up in a really significant way in the long run. And habits are a lot like that. They're not exactly like compound interest, where you kind of like hit that hockey stick portion of the curve, but they really feel like that a lot. Like we were saying just a few moments ago, it feels insignificant on any day, but then you turn around 10 years later and it's actually, you're surprised by where you end up. And that's a hallmark of any compounding process, that the greatest returns are delayed. And so habits are like that too. They don't feel like much on any given day, but they really add up over the months and years.
And most of us overestimate the significance of the short-term stuff, and we underestimate the potential of the long-term, right? Is that just another cognitive bias?
Yeah, I don't know why we do that, but we do tend to feel like, we overestimate what we can get done in a day, underestimate in a year or a decade.
Do you think it's because we used to have shorter lifespans where maybe this stuff didn't play out? I mean, because this got us somewhere, we evolved to this point.
Well, so we do have, and this definitely plays an important role in habits, we do have a bias toward the present. And that makes sense, right? That example I gave about like finding a berry bush, 100 meters away. Well, you should, in fact, go get the food that's close by and not the food that's on the other side of the mountain, because that just makes logical sense. You'd rather have it now, especially when we were not in modern society, right? For 99.999% of human history, we're just trying to survive like every other animal. And so you should prioritize immediate food, immediate shelter, immediate water, immediate safety. And in fact, our brains are wired to do that. But modern society is a whole different ballgame because we have all these things that actually you should prioritize delayed outcomes. So you go to college now and then you graduate in 4 years. You save for retirement today and then you retire decades from now. You show up at work this week and then you get a paycheck in a month. And so it's actually like there are all kinds of things we do in modern society that require you to delay gratification. And that runs a little counter to what our wiring is or what our biological preference is.
Right. I just thought of the term like caveman. Whenever someone talks like a caveman doing something, it's like the caveman's just thinking like, okay, immediate gratification. What do I got to do now to survive? And we've now pretty much reverse engineered all of that stuff out.
Yeah. It makes sense that our brain is like that, but we just are kind of in a mismatched environment a little bit. And so to bring this back to habits, there's a sort of a misalignment of rewards that often happens with habits. So there's an immediate outcome, an immediate reward, and then an ultimate reward. And for your bad habits, one reason bad habits stick so readily, that they form so easily, is because bad habits, often the immediate reward is favorable, right? Like what's the immediate reward of eating a donut? It's kind of great. It's sweet, it's sugary, it tastes good. It's only the ultimate reward, if you repeat that habit for 6 months or a year or 2 years, that is unfavorable. Meanwhile, good habits are often the exact opposite. The immediate reward of going to the gym or going to the gym for like a week isn't really that great. Your body's probably sore. You don't have much to show for it. Your body looks the same. Your weight hasn't really changed. But if you stick to that for 6 months or a year or 2 years, then the ultimate reward is favorable. And so a lot of the balance or a lot of the challenge of building good habits and breaking bad ones is figuring out how to pull the long-term costs of your bad habits into the present moment, so you feel a little bit of that pain right now and have a reason to avoid it, and pull the long-term rewards of your good habits into the present moment so it feels good and you have a reason to kind of make it through that like valley of death in the beginning and stick with it while you're waiting for those delayed rewards to accumulate. I think we could just summarize that whole cognitive bias or misalignment of rewards by saying the cost of your good habits is in the present and the cost of your bad habits is in the future. And the fact that we prioritize the present over the future ends up making a lot of habit change difficult for that reason.
Does that mean you have to go deeper into that identity in order to bring those future things forward? Or is it just about realizing them in the now? You know,
it's a good question. I think, so you're on the right track because I think that the ultimate form of intrinsic gratification is a reaffirmation of your desired identity. So if your desired identity is, I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts, or I'm an athlete, every time you're doing a squat, literally you can be in the middle of the rep and you're already getting gratified because you're acting in alignment with the type of person you want to be. It's like, oh, I just did that rep, I didn't miss this workout. That feels good. Now, I do think it takes a little while to get to that point where that actually feels like you. You know, you can imagine somebody goes to the gym for the first week or the first month. They don't quite identify that way yet because they haven't spent enough time there. Stephen Pressfield, the writer, he wrote War of Art.
Yeah.
So I think it's in the War of Art. He has a piece where he talks about a wolf and how the wolf develops a territory, right? Okay. But the only way that it develops a territory is by being there, by walking around the terrain every day. And then it starts to feel like this is mine, this is my home. And he talks about writers doing that by like you make the chair and the computer and the desk in your office your territory, it becomes your terrain. And I think that is true for most habits too. Like when you walk into the gym for the first time, you feel very uncertain. It's not your territory. You don't feel like it's your terrain. But once you show up again for a week or a month or a year, at some point you cross this invisible threshold where it starts to feel like, yeah, this is for me, or I belong. And that, I think, once you've crossed that stage, it becomes more likely that you can get that kind of reaffirmation of your identity and start to instantly feel gratified. But there are other things that you can do in the short term to feel more gratified while you're working on those habits. So here's just one little tactic. Let's say that you're either trying to work out or build a habit of meditating or something. And so each time you do your habit of meditating for 5 minutes, you have this little jar of marbles, and you got like 100 marbles in there, and 90 are red and 10 are blue. And after each instance of your habit, you walk over and you pull a marble out of the jar. And if you pull out one of the 90, then nothing happens. It's just like pat on the back, good job, you did what you're supposed to. But if you pull out one of the 10, then you get some kind of reward that's exciting to you. Maybe you get to watch Netflix for an hour and not feel guilty, or go for a walk outside, or take a bubble bath, or buy yourself a new jacket, whatever it is, like something that feels rewarding. And what you just did was you introduced an element of immediate gratification and of like surprise and delight to the whole process. And so, yeah, that first week when you're meditating, you still might not identify as a meditator, or you still might not have a sense of calm wash over your life. But you have this other interesting thing that is rewarding right away that maybe gets you to stick with it while you're waiting for those long-term rewards to accumulate.
And the variable reward, is that an important part of that?
Yeah, so that does introduce a variable reward for that one, right? And so for people listening, if you're not familiar, the term variable reward is, it's been widely studied in psychology. Actually, the way they discovered it was an accident. B.F. Skinner, the researcher who came across it, was running low on food pellets. So the rats that he was training, he would give them a pellet whenever they did the thing that he wanted. And he was running low on them. He had to hand press them each time. And so he thought, well, maybe I'll just give them one every other time. And it turns out that actually increased the rate that the rats would act and do the thing because they didn't know if they were going to get it or not. So they were like, something must be wrong. Like, I need to press this lever even more because I thought I was supposed to get one every time. And it turns out that actually leads to a spike in activity. And so a variable reward can be a good way to increase the frequency with which you do a habit. Now, it's worth noting, it's not like a panacea. You can't just take something you don't want to do and then make the reward vary and then be like, oh, now I'll do it. Because it doesn't work that way. But if you already want to do it, then it'll increase the rate at which you do.
Right. And there's a great book called Hooked by Nir Eyal,
Yeah.
and he talks about that. And if you work in Silicon Valley, you're very familiar with variable reward because a lot of our apps are based on that. Maybe we can talk about that at the end.
Sure.
Something that's become really obvious is it feels like, well, I think all of life is a game between your conscious and subconscious. And it feels like part of these habits are almost like tricking your subconscious into thinking I am this person. And part of the way it does that is when you repeat these habits, your subconscious says, I guess I am a runner if I'm running 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Are there other ways to like hack into that? And I'll throw you a curveball, but there's this concept of affirmations, you know, where people say out loud every day what they are with the hopes that they become that person. Is this a way to maybe hack into some of this habit forming stuff? And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so affirmations or visualization or the kind of idea of like fake it till you make it. I don't think there's anything wrong with those things. There's nothing wrong with being more, if you get to choose what story you tell yourself, you might as well choose a positive one, right? But I do think that my method differs a little bit from positive affirmations or from fake it till you make it in the following way. So fake it till you make it is asking you to believe something about yourself without having evidence for it yet, right? You say, I'm a healthy person, even though you haven't gone to the gym yet or whatever. And we have a word for beliefs that don't have evidence. We call it delusion, right? Like at some point, your brain doesn't like this mismatch between what you're saying and what you're doing. And so the only nuance, the difference in my argument is that I think that we should let the behavior lead the way. So let the behavior drive the belief rather than the belief drive the behavior. And to be clear, it can work both ways, and it does throughout daily life. Like people adopt a new belief and then they take a new action because of it. But I think that if you're trying to get yourself to latch onto a new identity or tell yourself a new story, it's more powerful to let the behavior lead the way because the behavior provides immediate evidence that you are that kind of person. So if you say, I'm a healthy person, you might be able to, it's like a short-term strategy. You might be able to amp yourself up or motivate yourself in the moment. But if you do 5 push-ups, you immediately have proof, I'm a person who works out. And there's something about that evidence that I think makes it easier for you to root that new story in something. It gives you a reason to actually hold on to it. And so for that reason, I think it's more useful to start with the small habits, build up some evidence and proof of that new identity. And then the more that you do that, the bigger the pile of evidence becomes, the more reason you have to actually believe, hey, that is me.
Yeah, maybe some combination of both or something. When you were talking about the working out story, I kept thinking of this Arnold Schwarzenegger quote from the movie Pumping Iron when he was like, every rep I was smiling, he said, because it was getting me one step closer to Mr. Olympia. And then you look at him and you're like, okay, I can see why Arnold would think that, but most people, every rep is pain, and they don't see it. So is that a way of him kind of hacking forward those for future payouts?
I think that is similar to what you mentioned earlier about like, oh, cigarettes are poison, or the story about the bread, like, oh, carbs being unhealthy or whatever. Is that he was finding a different way. He was developing a new meaning for the same experience, right? Usually, it's the meaning you ascribe to that experience is my muscles are burning. This is painful. I'm not enjoying this. It requires sacrifice. And he twisted that around to say, this is great, the pain means I'm growing, it means I'm moving forward, I'm getting closer to my goal, and so on. And I think there's something powerful about good habits become easy habits when you can learn to find joy in delaying gratification, right? And so he was finding a way to get pleasure out of the process of putting in the work. And that can be a really powerful motivator in the long run.
Is that called reframing?
Yeah, and I think that I've thought about writing about this more. I haven't written a ton about it yet, but I think that there are strategies and a few different mindset reframes that you can go through that can really change the likelihood that you stick with a habit. If you learn the right story to tell yourself, it becomes easier to maintain that over the long run.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.
Hi, it's Brian Rose from London Real. You probably know that we've just recently been re-platformed on YouTube after 25 months completely in the dark. The truth is, I really need your help. What I really need you to do is click on that subscribe button right now, like this video, and maybe even leave a comment or share the link with friends. We're really fighting against an algorithm that's tried to keep us quiet for so long. And the more subscribers we have, the more people watch our content, the better guests we can bring you, the better content, and we can continue transforming lives. We've been doing this for 14 years now. I want to do this for another 14 years, but I really need your help. So click on that subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment, share this, and we're going to continue to bring you more and more great content. Thank you.
Most people will never see this opportunity. Dubai luxury transformation projects have historically delivered 40 to 90% annual returns. That is incredible. These were once reserved only for insiders with access. I spent 15 years on Wall Street and I learned this: the biggest returns always go to the people who get the call first. Now, you finally can. We've just received a brand new project with major upside potential. Allocations move fast. Click the link, apply now, and speak to my team. This is your chance to see what others never will.